Hey y'all, this is Chris Johnson at Living Waters Fly Fishing. Today we're going to be doing another fly tying tutorial. This is going to be the Ozark Craw when I'm done with it. It's not tied yet, but we'll get there. This is a pattern that I developed many years ago, and I've used it all over the hill country and beyond. It's an impressionistic crawfish. It's not really meant to be a spitting image. It's not like the pinch hitter where it's really got the, the split claws and that really neat back and all that sort of stuff where it literally, when it's sitting still, it looks exactly like one. This is really meant to be something that just moves like mad and is crawfish-esque, if you will. This pattern was originally tied with a material called Marabou or mottled Marabou from Spirit River. That material has been discontinued, but I still wanted the fly to exist. So the way that I got around that is by tying with whiting soft hackle Chickabou. And this is in a Spey, the Spey line, which this stuff is really hard to get now. We still have some at the shop currently, but even if this goes the way of the dodo, one of the things you can do, even if you have standard strung Marabou, I'm going to show you that all I'm doing is, sandwiching Marabou feathers on one another throughout this tying process. All you have to do is stack them on top of one another to create that blended look that really, even the blending of colors in this kind of gives the illusion of even more motion, just from the standpoint of they can't really peg a single color. It's all just kind of intermingled and waving under the water. And we've caught bass on this, sunfish on this, carp on this. I've caught rock bass on this, trout on this. Everything eats it. So it's a wonderful pattern. You can scale it up if you need, a bigger profile, bigger bait. You can also scale it down and even decrease the weight if you're fishing in creeks or still water environments where you just don't need those heavy sink rates sometimes. It's very easy to tailor to your needs, and switching colors is a breeze because it's all controlled with the Marabou. So super simple fly to tie, not a whole lot of steps in the grand scheme of things. I think you'll really enjoy fishing it. You're going to enjoy tying it. It's easy, and you just get a pile of stuff on the bench and you're going to be set. So let's go ahead and get started with the Ozark Craw. So first off, we have a Gamakatsu B10S. This is a size 6 that I've got in the vise today. But you can, like I said, scale up or down as your needs be. I'm going to be using a 10-aught Veevus in kind of a tan or a brown. I think this is dark tan if you wanted the technical color. And then I don't have a label to show you, but I'm going to be using those painted dumbbell eyes from Sightcast today. I rip the labels off these things as soon as I open them, so that's not very helpful for your purposes, but at the tying bench, the labels serve no real usage at that point. So what we're going to do is basically start the thread as we would any other fly pattern. We're just going to trim that or break it off, whichever you prefer. And I'm going to take this, kind of migrate that thread just a little bit back. One of the things here is don't put these too far forward. We are going to do a little bit of work on the front side here, so we want to make sure we've got 2 Marabou feathers and some foxtail to add on the front side of this fly. The other thing is I don't want it to just straight plummet. And I'm going to kind of force these eyes into position. And I would say these might even be a little bit further back than what I normally put them, but it's not going to bother me. That doesn't bother me too much. I normally like about 3 eye widths back. That's probably getting closer to 3.5 to 4. Again, it's going to help the swim. When these things actually fall, you have to think about a crawfish. A lot of times they'll fall straight down. That's okay, but here, one of the powers behind this fly is the fact that you can swim it like a streamer and use it as a searching pattern. And having those eyes a little bit further back, keep it from kind of bouncing up and down and actually having more of a linear, glide path when you're swimming it. So a couple of frapping wraps there. Those things should be nice and secure. Rattle your finger over it there just to make sure everything's all well and good. We are going to begin with the soft hackle Chickabou. I'm going to tie in 2 different colors. This is a dyed tan, and these feathers, the thing that's so cool about them is they're very fibrous. So it's a lot like strung Marabou on the one side, and then if you come down here, it's a lot more like Chickabou, where it's going to be a little bit more fluffy, which, both of which serve their purpose. In the soft hackle Chickabou realm, I'm going to grab a couple of feathers here. This is the tan, and pardon me for prepping these off camera. I have a pile of different colors up here. We've got the golden brown as well. Going to take 1 or 2 of those. Get those ready as well. And this, like I was saying, you can use a strung Marabou feather to do the same thing here if need be. But I'll have you look. These things are just beautiful when you stroke them down, just that nice wispy, really great silhouette. If you're using a very dense Chickabou, it would take 1 feather. If you're using more of a fibrous strung Marabou or something of the sort, it's going to take a couple of feathers. So here, I'm going to blend all that together and look at what happens. You get this really neat mottled appearance, which actually mirrors that Marabou that we used to tie with. Notice how the feathers, I'm not too concerned about like how even they are here because I've blended them, and I don't really like a super hard edge on this fly. So if you don't want to, have them perfectly even, I would view that as a plus. The Marabou, you had to cut it off of like essentially like a feather boa, and it was really weird stuff. Super useful material. It was easy to tie with, but they've discontinued it. It used to be available through Spirit River, and it's gone now. If you can find some on the the dark web or something, snatch it. It's great stuff. But notice that those feathers aren't perfectly uniform. They're not. I don't want that real hard edge. If you blend this together, it's going to actually kind of have a little bit of a taper to it now, which I like. Crawfish have that pointed end towards the end of their shell, and then they have the claws out after that. So I like that kind of transitional look to it where it kind of tapers down. We're just going to secure all that on this end where we have a really good tie-in point up here by the eyes. So all we're going to do now is actually add some legs. Now there's kind of a couple trains of thought here. I'm going to add a soft hackle too. You could add the legs after the soft hackle if you wanted to kick them out more. I kind of like adding them underneath the soft hackle just so they stay kind of inside everything that's going on. I've probably altered the way I've tied this fly over the years. I'm going to show you a couple of things here. These were the original legs that I used, those fly enhancer legs. That's the item code if you ever need it. And they're a pumpkin and light blue. But also, when I'm tying these in darker colors, having something like these Loco legs works. These work so well. And it's just that kind of really cool kind of glitter pumpkin. But I still like the blue tips. Well, there is a tool that is not a fly tying tool, and it's just a marker. These are dye markers that you would use in traditional bass fishing. And what that allows you to do is take a leg that looks like this and dye the ends of it. And so now I can literally take this marker, apply it to that end, and I've got my blue tips on there just like I want. So I'm going to do that for this one. If you want to use the originals, that's totally fine. That is not a problem. You can simply take the originals and just use the blue tips here. But I'm going to grab the legs that I need, trim those, get them about to the manageable length that I'm after here. So now we've got blue tips, and we're going to do 2 legs off each side of the hook. The idea behind that is when the legs actually kind of get back together, when they're being stripped or you're swimming it, doing whatever you need to, it's going to actually look like a claw. And so we're going to tie those in together, 2 on each side. You'll notice that they are off to the side of the hook ever so slightly. We're going to take those, trim your tag ends here, which in this case are pretty long. Trim those nice and tight. Secure the legs. I want those to go absolutely nowhere. And I like them right where they're at, right off to the side there. That's perfect. Take the next 2 legs, same thing. Remember, the blue tips, if they're a little short, you can always add more with the marker. If they're too, if the tip itself, you don't want the legs too short. The legs need to poke out past the Marabou. I'm going to get those pretty close to even. I'm going to come in there and trim those perfectly even when it's all said and done. Make your first wrap, move those legs into position where you want them to be. Wrap over, and you'll notice now we have legs off both sides of the hook. Come in here, trim that nice and neat. Trim that a little bit tighter. I don't like those little ends poking up there. That one end is going to fight me to the bitter end. All right. I nicked him, so I'm going to just get in there and get him out. All right. So with that, I've got legs on either side. And if you'll look, I can actually pull these in kind of a V-style shape to where you can see where they're located. They're off both sides here. Once I have those in kind of a V position, a lot of times I'll make a couple of wraps back on them, just to where I'm guaranteed they're going to stay in position off both sides of that little Marabou clump. Out the back of the fly here, if you look, you can see the blue tips, and they're going to be slightly past the Marabou, which is great. If you want to trim these to length, slip your scissors very carefully open, don't close them. Slip them here. You'll see the first leg fell, and I've got those little blue tips right on the end. That's exactly what I want. Little blue tips on the end of the legs just as a little accent, and we're all good and set. Now, what I want to do is add a soft hackle. And the one that I use and that I like the most are these wild type Hebert minor hackles from Whiting. So this is a Whiting Farms Hebert minor wet fly hackle. If you need the item code or anything like that, it's right there. So there's your product code and wild type brown. I'm going to simply grab a larger feather. I want one that's going to be kind of off the bottom side of the pelt where I mean, it's a pretty large feather. That's got a lot going on there. I'm going to strip the end like this to where I've just kind of created a little V point to tie in there. So kind of splay that out, tie this in by the tip, watching out for your legs, try not to get in the way of anything. Trim that little guy off, keep your thread right there behind the eyes. If you want to use hackle pliers, you are more than welcome to. If you want to hand wrap it, these feathers are long enough that you can actually get away with that. The only thing you need to be aware of is you need to manually make sure your legs are in the proper position and then stroke this stuff back as you wrap it. And then the final bits of the wrap, I try to cram as much of that in behind the eyes as possible. So you see we're starting to get a nice little soft hackle collar there, which is exactly what we're after. Legs are in the right position off both sides. And then here, I'm going to just barely, I'm going to stroke that back. I don't want that poking out the front. I'm going to get into the downy just a little bit. Again, this fly is all about movement. Make maybe one wrap of that downy, come over it, tie that in nice and tight. Anything that's poking out the front, stroke back, make a few securing wraps. Don't jump your eyes like I did there, and you are good to go. Come in here, trim that quill off nice and tight. And now we've got this little soft hackle collar that's got that mottled feather underneath it, so that's going to make another little movement point. And we've got our little blue tip legs there. And at this point, we're going to jump in front of the eyes. I'm going to take 2 or 3 more depending on the density of the feather. Do be aware that you might want to kind of play with proportions on this. Not every feather is created equal. That's the wonderful thing about tying with natural materials, is there is a little bit of variance to it. So here I'm going to take a golden brown, so one that's about yay color there. I'm going to take an actual grizzly brown, so it's going to be one that's a little bit darker. And again, none of these feathers are going to be exactly the same just because they're going to be different densities and such. And I like the stuff that's going to be located close to the Chickabou patch, but not exactly. So you can see this feather is quite a bit more fluffy than this one. So I'm going to layer those up. I'm going to actually take a second brown here. All right. I've got 1 golden brown and 2 browns. And that should be enough to kind of create that mottled appearance there. So if I kind of put all these together, I am going to get them pretty close. They're going to be pretty close in length. Not exact, but close. I'm going to tie these in slightly shorter than the back. Mottled Marabou allowed you to kind of just clump it in there, and it just kind of fell naturally and looked great. But if we move these all the way back, it's going to have this really unnatural taper to it. And it's going to be a real hard edge on the back of that fly, and I don't really want that. So here, I'm going to tie that in. You're going to have feathers and marabou going everywhere, and that's kind of part of the deal. Pull those up, trim them tight. Once you've done so, all we're going to do is make sure they're right. I'm going to smash those in between the eyes. Give a few more wraps going back towards the eyes, and then I'm going to finish off whatever's left over. I just want a nice little clean thread head when it's all said and done. So now you can see I've got this top side that's going to be a little bit shorter than that bottom, which is okay, because when this all slicks down, it's going to look really, really good in the water. And so I'm going to kind of flare those out, position those appropriately, and that's exactly what I want right there. The final step to this fly is going to be to add some foxtail. So I use natural red fox. It's a really great color. If you have dyed fox, that's great too. The foxtail though has that nice modeling to it, a real dark gray base. I love that. So get yourself a little snip of some foxtail. Now, it's going to be an absolute mess because foxtail has a ton of underfur, which you can see there. Get yourself a brush. If you can get it through there, look at all that. We don't want any of that stuff. That can be really good dubbing for a redfish fly later though. So get a few brushes out of there. The idea behind this is I want all this. I don't want all that. And we're going to cut a lot of that off once we tie this in. I'm not stacking this. I am going to pull some of the longer fibers out to where it's a little bit more uniform, but I'm going to tie this in to where it literally is no longer than the hook bend. There maybe just a touch longer. Let's go just a touch longer. But you don't want it to come way, way back there. This is made to be kind of a short, condensed wing right there. So when you tie that in, you can see now it's got this really cool little wing that you can see the black tips on the longest guard hairs come a little past the hook bend, but not a whole heck of a lot. You don't want a ton. So here I'm going to trim this, and I don't want to, I mean, this is bulky material, so just be aware it is going to be a little bit of a mess to try to get all this tied down. I'm try to get that pretty short, and I'm going to just migrate the thread down this, and it's going to build up a little bit of a thread head here, and that's okay. It's kind of no different than if you were tying a clouser or something like that. There's going to be quite a bit of thread that's necessary to smooth this out, make it look right. You just want to jump that up, make sure you've got it where you need it, that all that fox is tied down nice and firm, and that you have this nice clean little thread head. And if you've got any little guys poking out there, I've got one right there that's bothering me. Trim him off. Good, that's better. And all I'm going to do to finish this fly, I mean after a couple of whip finishes of course, is I'm going to add a drop of like epoxy or head cement or something like that, just to make sure that any exposed thread head is always going to be a vulnerability when it comes to durability. So I always finish this one with some form of head cement or epoxy. So just be aware of that, and I like to kind of build this up right here to where it's not quite as skinny on that side. Take this guy, and somewhere in this menagerie of fly tying stuff I have a whip finisher. We're going to add a couple of whip finishes right here. Once we've added those, our work here is done. Again, all we would want to do, we've checked our legs have already been trimmed to the proper length. You look at the top side of this, those eyes kind of stay hidden right underneath that marabou and fox fur. And you've got this elongated tail section on the bottom side of the fly, and the top section is just a little bit shorter. And that's what we're after. And that is a finished Ozark Craw. This fly is just absolutely spectacular in the hill country. I highly recommend you fish it anywhere you go. Carp, catfish, everything loves it. And again, all we would do here is just put a little finishing dot of head cement to complete the entire process, and our work here is done. All right, and all we're gonna do is just take this. This is Raid Zap in the thin. So like I said, I normally add a little drop. That's gonna be a little too much there. We're just going to take this little guy and dab it around evenly. If you have a bodkin, you can use that here. There's no problem with that. Do not get it in the eye of the hook. Normally, I'll just use the tip of this applicator to do this. If you want a little bit more exacting work, absolutely, you can use a bodkin. No problem there at all. The UV cure is nice, though, because it really finishes that fly, gives it a really good look. I'm going to make sure there's enough right there in that little corner. That's looking nice. You want that to kind of get all in there, nice and secure. Just kind of stroke that around using that little applicator tip. At which point, you're going to hit that with not your dye marker, but your UV pen or light, whatever you got. Just cure that with some UV light is all we're doing. I'm just going to simply rotate the fly around while I do that. I've got this little bitty like laser pointer light, so you have to be really exact, which is probably not the best call here. Get yourself a bigger light. Go find you a local fly shop that sells bigger lights. At that point, you have a finished Ozark Craw that's already been treated. This thing's ready to fish, and that head's going to be nice and hard and stand up to the durability that, or actually stand up to the elements and have the durability that you need. So finished, nice and neat, and just a great little pattern for anywhere that has kind of crawfish about this size. Again, you can scale it up or down as need be. If you have any questions, reach out to us on social media, leave something in the comments, or call the fly shop, and we will see you next time. Thank y'all so much for watching, and take care.